My son blocked me on the day his baby was born. That was the first thing I saw when my phone froze. The screen flashing red with a message I never thought would bear his name. No explanation. No warning. Just silence wrapped in technology. A wall between a mother and the moment she had been waiting for her whole life. My name is Maribel Crane. I am 78 years old. For 50 years, I worked as an ICU nurse in Oregon through nights of flatlines, desperate families, and the quiet courage of strangers clinging to life. I thought I knew what real loss was. I thought I understood the difference between pain you endure and pain you heal from. But that morning, sitting in my kitchen with a pot of coffee cooling beside me, I realized I had never known the kind of pain that comes when your own child erases you from the room where your bloodline is being written. Ethan is my only son. I raised him alone after his father left when Ethan was 8. Every shift I took, every extra holiday spent in the hospital instead of at home, I told myself it was so Ethan could have a life that didn't involve secondhand coats and overdue bills. I thought we were close, not the movie kind of close, not perfect, but bound by something real. The day his daughter was born, I was already dressed by 6. I'd ironed the pale blue sweater Ethan had always said made me look like home. I had the hospital gift bag ready, tiny socks, a soft blanket I'd knit during long winter nights, and, wrapped separately, the 1954 atlas. That atlas had lived with us since Ethan was 5. We'd traced lines across it with colored pencils, dreaming of the places we'd go when life wasn't so tight. It wasn't just paper. It was the language of our shared future. At 8:12 a.m., I texted Ethan, "I'm on my way. Do you need coffee?" No response. At 8:25, I called straight to voicemail. At 8:31, I tried Laura. The call rang once, then clicked dead. By 8:40, I checked his profile picture in my contacts, and it was gone, replaced with a gray silhouette. A moment later, the text from my carrier appeared. "You have been blocked by this number." I drove to the hospital anyway. The parking lot was half empty, the winter air biting through my coat. I walked in, told the receptionist my name, and she glanced at her screen with the kind of expression that says, "I've been told to deal with you gently." She didn't meet my eyes when she said, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Crane, you're not on the visitor list." I thought there must be a mistake. "I'm his mother," I said. "The baby's grandmother." She lowered her voice. "They've made it very clear. No exceptions." That was the moment the air in my chest turned heavy, not with age, but with something more corrosive. I sat down in the waiting area, the gift bag on my lap, and watched other families pass through. Balloons bobbing, flowers rustling, faces lit with new beginnings. A man about my age walked past holding a camcorder, grinning ear to ear, telling the nurse his daughter had just given him his second grandson. The joy in his voice hit me like a slap. I stayed until noon, hoping Ethan might step out, see me, and change his mind. But when the elevator doors opened at 11:47, I caught a glimpse of him clean-shaven, wearing a new navy sweater I'd never seen. Laura at his side, the baby in her arms. They didn't see me. Or maybe they did. They turned toward a cluster of people near the window. Laura's parents, her sister, a man I didn't recognize but who laughed like he belonged. They posed for photos, the kind you know will live on, mantelpieces and holiday cards. I waited for a signal, something, anything to invite me in. Instead, Laura's mother draped a white blanket over the baby's head just before Ethan looked my way. He didn't nod, he didn't smile, he simply adjusted his hold on the baby and turned his back. That was the first time in my life I felt like a ghost in my own bloodline. By the time I drove home, the coffee in my travel mug was cold. The gift bag sat on the passenger seat like a witness. I set it on the kitchen table, the atlas on top. The house was quiet, quieter than it had been in years. I told myself maybe this was about Laura, maybe she was overwhelmed, maybe new motherhood had made her draw a circle too small to fit me in. But even as I thought it, I saw the way Ethan had looked at me in the hospital, not with discomfort, but with finality. That night, I opened my laptop. His business's homepage filled the screen, a clean, modern layout, all whites and blues, photos of Ethan smiling at charity events, shaking hands with city officials, holding Laura's hand in a perfect golden hour shot. A new banner stretched across the top, a self-made story, from nothing to everything. I scrolled, and there it was, a slideshow of his personal journey. The family photos began with Ethan as a baby in Laura's mother's arms, a toddler on his father's shoulders, a teenager at a graduation stage. I wasn't in any of them. Not one. Even the ones I knew I'd been there for: school awards, summer trips to the coast, had been cropped or replaced. I thought of the atlas again, and for the first time it struck me that he might not see it as a gift anymore. Maybe he saw it as an inconvenience, a reminder of a version of himself he'd rather erase. The next morning, Sophie Tran called. I'd met her once, briefly, when Ethan convinced me to move some savings into what he called a family growth account. Sophie's voice was brisk. Mrs. Crane, I'm sorry to bother you, but I thought you should know Ethan closed the joint authorization on the account. You no longer have access. I sat down, gripping the phone. Why would he? She hesitated. I'm not sure, but the withdrawal was substantial. If you need advice, I can refer you to someone. I thanked her, even though I could barely form the words. That account wasn't much in the grand scale of wealth, but it was the cushion I'd built from a lifetime of double shifts. It was the safety net I thought we both respected. The block on my phone wasn't just about a hospital visit, it was about removing me from something bigger, something I didn't yet understand. That evening, I unwrapped the atlas from its brown paper. The cover was worn, the spine softened from decades of use. I flipped through the pages, the colored pen lines still marking our planned adventures: red to Yellowstone, green to New York, blue to Alaska. On the last page, in Ethan's boyish handwriting, one day, Mom, I closed the book, feeling its weight. It wasn't just paper. It was proof, and for reasons I couldn't yet name, I knew I might need it. In the weeks that followed, I didn't hear from Ethan. The holidays came, and the only card in my mailbox with their name on it was a glossy company postcard with Ethan and Laura in matching sweaters, the baby between them, under the words, "Grateful for our beginnings." My beginnings were nowhere to be seen. I pinned the postcard to the fridge, not as a decoration, but as a reminder. A nurse learns to watch for patterns: the fever that spikes before the real illness shows, the cough that doesn't fit the chart. This was a pattern. My son wasn't just pushing me away. He was replacing me, and the day he blocked me wasn't the end of something. It was the opening note of a long, deliberate erasure. 3 weeks passed before I heard his name out loud again. It came from an unexpected voice. I was in the garden that morning, pruning back the rose bushes before winter could finish them off. When my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize, I almost ignored it, thinking it might be another robocall, but something habit maybe made me answer. Mrs. Crane, this is Sophie Tran. We spoke once about your portfolio. I remembered her immediately. A firm handshake, sharp eyes, voice that didn't waste syllables. Ethan had brought her to dinner last year, introduced her as the financial brain behind one of his projects. Back then, I'd thought she was just another polished young professional, orbiting his new life. I'm sorry to call unannounced, she said, but I thought you'd want to know Ethan moved funds yesterday from the Heritage Savings account. I set the pruning shears down on the stone ledge. That's the account with my name on it. She corrected. Your authorization's been removed. Legally, it's clean. He had Conor privileges, but the transfer was substantial. High-risk placement, no guaranteed return. I knew exactly what that account was. Every overtime shift, every holiday double pay I'd taken instead of family dinners, most of it ended up there. It wasn't a fortune, but it was safe. Safe was the point. Why are you telling me this? I asked. There was a pause. Because I don't like seeing people blindsided, and I don't think you're in the loop. Her words were precise, almost surgical, not sympathy, just clarity. What's he using it for? I asked. I can't disclose specifics, she said. But if you follow his company announcements in the next few weeks, you'll figure it out. I thanked her, hung up, and went inside. The house felt smaller than usual. I made coffee I didn't want and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the folder where I kept my account statements. I didn't need to open it. I already knew the number was gone. That night, I tried calling Ethan again, same to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't want my voice to sound like begging. 2 days later, the company announcement Sophie had hinted at went live. It was everywhere. Ethan on the local business segment, smiling like a man on the edge of something great. This is just the beginning, he told the anchor. We're scaling fast. And it's all about building a legacy from scratch. The word scratch landed in my chest like a stone. Scratch meant no one had helped. No one had sacrificed. No one had worked 2 jobs for 20 years to keep him in new shoes and books that weren't hand-me. At the bottom of the news article, there was a link to the company's new promotional video. I clicked. It opened with a slow montage, grainy photos of Ethan as a boy, only the ones that suited the story. No hospital Christmas shifts, no cramped apartments, no me. Laura's voice narrated, warm and clear. Ethan was raised with nothing but his own determination and a vision for something bigger. I stopped the video halfway through. My coffee had gone cold again. The next morning, a thick envelope arrived. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Athens, from years ago. Inside was a single-page letter. Mom, this isn't personal. Please understand the choices I'm making are for the brand. Public perception is everything right now. I can't have conflicting narratives in circulation. You've had your life. This is mine. No signature, no date. Just that. I read it twice before realizing what it really meant. He was telling me to stay quiet. That afternoon, I went to the bank, not to ask for the money back, that ship had sailed, but to close the small checking account we'd kept for shared emergencies. The teller, a young man who looked barely old enough to shave, hesitated when I asked for the full balance. There's a pending auto transfer scheduled for Friday, he said, recurring monthly. Same recipient as the last one. Cancel it, I told him. He frowned. It's to your son's business account. Are you sure? I met his eyes. I'm sure. He clicked a few keys, and just like that, one more tether between us dissolved. By the end of the week, I started hearing things in town. Not rumors, exactly statements, dressed up as casual comments. At the grocery store, the woman bagging my bread asked if it was true Ethan had pulled himself up without a safety net. At church, one of the younger members mentioned seeing an article where Ethan said his drive came from breaking away from limiting influences. Limiting influences. I knew who that meant. The final push came on a rainy Tuesday. I was sorting mail when a cream-colored invitation slid from the stack. Gold embossed letters, naming ceremony, Charlotte Grace Crane. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, this was the Olive Branch, until I saw the location. Not a quiet family gathering, but the ballroom of the downtown Hilton. The guest list printed inside read more like a press release than an invitation. City council members, local press, venture capital partners. My name wasn't there. I checked twice, 3 times. No mistake. I called Laura's number. It rang, then cut off. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. Please respect our space. The event is for close family and key partners. I almost laughed at close family. I set the invitation on the counter, rainwater from the envelope bleeding the gold ink. That evening, I pulled the atlas from the shelf. The old cover was frayed, the edges curling from years of use. My handwriting ran alongside Ethan's in the margins, tiny notes about trips we never took. The last page still held his promise. One day, Mom. It struck me that I hadn't opened this book in years, and now, holding it again, I realized something else. This was the one thing Ethan couldn't edit out of a photo, or crop from a video. Next morning, I called Sophie. I want to schedule a transfer, I said. There was a pause. From which account? You've already from mine, the personal one. And I don't want him to know until it's done. She asked for the details. I gave them. The amount wasn't huge, but it was enough to set something aside, quietly, somewhere he couldn't reach. When we were done, Sophie said, "You're protecting yourself." I thought about that. I'm protecting the truth. After we hung up, I made tea and sat by the window, watching the rain blur the view of the street. In the distance, a delivery van pulled up in front of the old Thompson house. A young couple got out, carrying boxes, smiling in that way people do when they believe the world will only ever open doors for them. I wondered how long it would take before they learned about the doors that slam instead. The day of the naming ceremony, I didn't try to go. I stayed home, baked bread, and let the house fill with the smell of something warm and solid. At noon, my phone buzzed with a photo someone had tagged me in. Ethan on stage at the Hilton, holding the baby, Laura beside him in a pale dress. Behind them, a massive screen displayed ASLIDESHOW. In one image, Charlotte lay swaddled in a blanket I'd knit. The caption read, "A gift from a dear family friend, not from her grandmother." I closed the app and slid the phone away. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with the scent of wet earth. That night, I put the atlas on the table, opened to the last page, and placed a sticky note beside it. "Keep safe. For now." That was enough. The text came at 5:13 in the morning. Ethan, Laura's in labor, no greeting, no mom. Just the bare fact. Sent like a calendar notification. I pulled on my coat before the sun was up, keys in hand, ready to drive the 2 hours to the city. 20 minutes later, another buzz. Ethan, don't come. I stared at the screen. Me. Why? No answer. I called. Straight to voicemail. 5 minutes later, a different message appeared, not from him, but from Laura. Laura, the hospital's limiting visitors. Thanks for understanding. I knew the hospital's policy. 2 visitors allowed. Ethan's best friend Daniel lived across the country. The other slot was mine, should have been mine. I tried calling again. The call didn't even ring. My number had been blocked. For a moment, I stood frozen in my kitchen, phone in hand. The kettle, still hissing on the stove. The baby, my first grandchild, was arriving. And I was being cut out before I'd even seen his face. I told myself it had to be a misunderstanding. Maybe the stress of labor. Maybe a nurse's mix-up. I drove to the hospital anyway. The woman at the reception desk looked up from her computer. Name Maribel Crane. My son is Ethan Crane. His wife is Laura Crane. She cut me off with a practiced smile. They've noted no visitors at this time. I leaned forward. I'm his mother. Her tone didn't change. They've requested privacy. The word hit harder than I expected. Privacy. As though my presence was an intrusion. From where I stood, I could see the elevator at the end of the hall. I could picture Ethan stepping out, the baby in his arms, Laura beaming beside him. But the image dissolved into reality. The doors opening for strangers. I turned and walked out into the cold morning air. The smell of antiseptic still clinging to my clothes. In the car, I sat with my hands on the steering wheel, but I didn't start the engine. Instead, I scrolled through my phone. The last conversation with Ethan was weeks ago, when I'd asked about the land. He'd changed the subject to a product launch. I opened Sophie Tran's contact and typed, "Me, you were right." She called within minutes. What happened? They blocked me from seeing the baby, I said. My voice was steady, but my hand gripped the phone too tightly. On the day he was born, there was a pause. Then Sophie asked, "And the transfer paperwork? The one for the trust?" I had nearly forgotten. The trust fund money I'd been holding in my name for years was scheduled to be transferred to Ethan before the end of the quarter. A safety net, I'd told myself, for him and his family. Yes, I said. It's this month. Sophie hesitated. You still want to go through with it? Her question hung in the air. I thought of the land, already leveraged. The atlas, stolen into a magazine spread, the cropped family photo, the empty rocking chair at the baby shower. And now, the locked door of a hospital ward. Yes, I said finally, but on my terms. The next day, I drove to the bank. The clerk recognized me. Small towns have long memories, and ushered me into a glass-walled office. I asked for a delayed transfer, scheduled exactly 2 weeks from that day. Any specific reason for the delay? She asked. Timing, I said simply. In truth, I wanted to see what Ethan would do without immediate access. Would he notice? Would he call? Would he even try? By the time I got home, the baby had been born for nearly 24 hours. I learned about it the way strangers do, through a public post. On my phone, Laura's Instagram showed her in a hospital bed, hair styled, makeup perfect, Ethan cradling a swaddled newborn. The caption read, "Welcome to the world, Caleb James Crane, surrounded by love from day one." I read it twice. Surrounded by love did not include me. The next week passed without a single direct message from Ethan, not even a photo sent privately. But the public updates came like clockwork. Caleb's first yawn, his first bath, a video of Laura's parents holding him. One afternoon, Sophie called again. I've been looking deeper into Ethan's company filings. The wellness center project, the land's equity, isn't the only collateral. If he gets the trust funds, he's using them for the next phase. How do you know? I asked. There's a draft investor memo circulating. Your trust is listed as secured personal backing. So, before the baby was even born, he had already planned how to spend what I hadn't yet given him. That night, I took the atlas down from the shelf and flipped to the map of Oregon. The route from my town to his city was marked in faint pencil from decades ago. Back then, he'd asked if we could visit the big buildings someday. I'd promised we would. I traced the line to the city, but this time, I wasn't thinking of skyscrapers. I was thinking of a high-rise office where my son was turning my life's savings into a business stunt. The following morning, I made my decision. If Ethan wanted the transfer, he would have to see me in person. I called his office. A receptionist answered. May I speak with Ethan Crane? I'm sorry, he's in meetings all day. May I take a message? Tell him, Maribel called. His mother. Tell him it's about the transfer. I left it at that. 3 days later, my phone lit up. Ethan, got your message. What transfer? He knew exactly which one. Me. The trust. I'm ready to schedule. In person. Ethan, busy this week. Send the paperwork. Me. No. We'll do it together. There was a long gap before his next reply. Ethan, fine. Next Friday. I marked the date on my kitchen calendar in red ink, not just for the meeting, but because that was the day I would decide how much of my life he could still take. Until then, I kept quiet. Let him think it was routine. Let him think I was still the mother who signed away land without reading the fine print. But when Friday came, I would walk into that office with my eyes open, and this time, I wouldn't leave empty-handed. Friday came cold and sharp. The kind of morning where the air slices through your coat before you've even locked the door. I drove into the city with the bank folder on the passenger seat, my hands steady on the wheel. Ethan's office tower rose like a slab of glass against the gray sky. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of coffee and fresh paint. The receptionist was young, polished, wearing the kind of neutral smile that belonged to someone paid to keep distance. I'm here to see Ethan Crane, I said. She tapped at her keyboard. Name, Maribel, his mother. Her eyes flickered recognition, maybe surprise, but she picked up the phone and murmured into it. She's here. After a moment, she hung up. He'll be with you shortly. I waited in the lounge, flipping through a company brochure. Ethan's face was on the cover, all confidence and tailored suits, with the tagline, Building Wellness from the Ground Up. Inside, there were photos of smiling clients, sleek facilities, and one shot of him with Laura and the baby. Except, I recognized the original. I'd been in that photo once, at the edge. Here, my shoulder was gone, the frame neatly cropped. When Ethan finally appeared, he looked like he'd stepped off the page. Crisp navy suit, expensive watch, a faint scent of cologne I didn't recognize. He gave me the kind of smile you offer a business partner, not a parent. Mom, he said, as if the word were a formality. Let's go upstairs. His office was large, all glass and steel, with a view of the river. He gestured to a chair, across from his desk. So, the transfer. I placed the folder on the table, but didn't slide it toward him. Yes, but before we sign anything, I want clarity. His brow tightened. Clarity about what? Where the funds are going? He leaned back, fingers laced, into the business, as I've said. Expansion, new locations. It's all in the proposal. I've read your proposal, I said, and I've spoken to Sophie Tran. The flicker in his eyes was quick, but I caught it. Sophie has a habit of worrying people unnecessarily. She showed me your investor memo. My trust is listed as secured personal backing. That's just language, he said smoothly. Standard for investors. It makes the numbers look better. And if the expansion fails, he smiled without warmth. It won't. I opened the folder, revealing the unsigned transfer form. Ethan, this is my life's work. Years of double shifts, holidays in the ICU, saving every penny. I won't watch it disappear into a risk you won't even name, honestly. His tone sharpened. You're overthinking this. The money's sitting there doing nothing. You're not exactly traveling the world. That money is not doing nothing, I said. It's security. For me, for your son. The mention of Caleb made him pause. I'm providing for him. This expansion is for his future too. You blocked me on the day he was born, I said. My voice stayed even. Don't talk to me about his future when I wasn't even allowed in the room. His jaw tightened. That was Laura's decision. You agreed to it. He looked away toward the skyline. It was about keeping things simple. The birth was stressful. Simple for you, I said, erasing me from photos, from the hospital, from his life. Fit makes the story cleaner, for your brand. He turned back to me, irritation clear now. You're being dramatic. This is business, Mom. Public perception matters. I slid the form toward him but kept my hand on it. Then here's the business. The transfer will happen in 2 weeks, as scheduled. Until then, you'll send me full documentation of every planned use, every contract, every liability. His lips pressed into a thin line. You don't trust me. I'm giving you a chance to earn it back, I said. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he stood, walked to the window, and shoved his hands into his pockets. Fine, you'll have the documents by next week. I rose, picking up the folder. Good, I'll expect them. As I left the office, the receptionist gave me a small, curious glance, as if wondering what kind of mother walked out with the paperwork still in her bag. That weekend, I stayed home. No calls from Ethan, no photos of Caleb. I checked Laura's social media, once against my better judgment. The baby was in another set of professional shots. Laura's parents holding him like royalty. The caption read, "Grateful for the family who's been with us every step of the way." Monday morning, a package arrived at my door. Inside was the atlas, my atlas. The 1954 edition I'd bought when Ethan was 5, the one we'd marked with our travel dreams. But now, several pages were missing, torn clean from the spine. I called Ethan immediately. He answered after 2 rings. "Why did you send me the atlas?" I asked. "I thought you'd want it back," he said lightly. "We used it for a photo shoot." Laura's idea. A photo shoot for what? The company site. We're talking about journeys, legacy, that kind of thing. And the missing pages. There was a pause. "We framed them for the office. They looked good in the shot. You tore them out." "They're just pages, Mom." "No," I said quietly. "They're not." He sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. "Look, you'll have your money in 2 weeks, and I'll have my expansion. Let's not make this bigger than it is." After the call, I sat at the kitchen table with the atlas in front of me. The empty spaces where the pages had been felt heavier than the rest of the book. Sophie called that afternoon. "Did you get the documents yet?" "Not yet," I said. "You should know there's chatter in investor circles. If he doesn't get the transfer on time, one of his key backers will pull out. He's counting on your funds to keep the timeline intact." So the 2-week delay wasn't just an inconvenience. It was leverage. That night, I placed the atlas back on the shelf, the spine facing outward like nothing had changed. But I knew exactly where it was. And I knew that, for the first time in months, the timeline was in my hands, not his. The next Friday, an envelope arrived, courier service, signature required. Inside was a stack of contracts, projections, and promotional materials. I spent the weekend reading every word, marking margins with notes. Buried in the fine print was a clause. If the expansion failed, Ethan could reclaim personal contributions from familial sources at his discretion. In other words, if he lost everything, he could still come for what I had left. On Monday, I called Sophie. "We're going to the bank together on transfer day," I said. "You're still doing it?" she asked. "Yes, but not the way he thinks." Because now, I wasn't just protecting the trust, I was preparing for whatever came after. The morning of the transfer day started before dawn. The sky outside my kitchen window was still a flat, dull blue when I locked the atlas in the bottom drawer of my desk and slipped the key into my pocket. The coffee I made sat untouched on the counter. I wasn't in the mood to drink anything that might make my hands shake. Sophie arrived at 8 sharp, coat buttoned to her chin, a leather folder tucked under her arm. "You're ready?" she asked. I nodded. We drove to the bank in silence. The only sound, the steady hum of the tires on wet asphalt. Inside the branch, the lighting was soft and clinical. The manager, a tall man in a gray suit, recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Crane," he said. "Mr. Crane mentioned you'd be coming today." Sophie and I followed him to his office, where a neat stack of papers waited on the desk. He gestured to a chair. "The transfer form is here. It's straightforward." He looked at Sophie. "I understand. You're acting as an advisor." "That's right," she said. Her tone was even but firm. "We'll need to review all terms again before anything is signed." The manager hesitated. "I believe Mr. Crane has already provided." "I'm not signing based on what my son provided," I said, cutting him off. "I'm signing based on what's in front of me today." He gave a small nod and slid the form toward me. I didn't pick up the pen. Instead, I reached for the folders Sophie had brought. Inside were annotated copies of every contract Ethan had sent. She laid them side by side with the bank's version. The differences were small, but deliberate. Dates shifted. Clauses tightened. Repayment terms softened in his favor. I pointed to one line in particular. "This clause," I said, "about reclaiming personal contributions from familial sources, it stays out." "That's standard risk language," the manager began, but Sophie cut in. "It's not standard when the familial source is a 70-year-old retiree whose only income is a pension. Remove it." He studied us for a moment, then made a note. Anything else? Yes, I said. The funds are to be held in escrow for 30 days before disbursement. That gives time for independent verification of all vendor contracts. If any contract falls through in that window, the funds return to my account. That's unusual, he said. Then put it in writing, I replied. He nodded reluctantly and began typing the changes. While he worked, Sophie leaned toward me. You realize this might delay his whole expansion. I'm aware, I said. It took nearly an hour to finalize the revised document. When it was done, I signed, my pen steady. The manager slid the papers into a thick envelope, sealed it, and placed it in his outbox for processing. You'll get a confirmation by tomorrow, he said. Outside, the wind had picked up, scattering wet leaves across the sidewalk. Sophie exhaled. He's going to call you the moment he finds out about the changes. I'm counting on it, I said. He didn't wait until the confirmation arrived. By mid-afternoon, my phone rang. What the hell did you do? Ethan's voice was tight. I protected myself, I said. You've tied my hands. 30 days, that kills the launch date. Investors will panic. Then tell them the truth, I said. That you don't have the contracts lined up yet. You're sabotaging me, he snapped. I'm keeping the risk where it belongs on you, not me. There was a pause, then a low, controlled tone. Do you want to be cut out entirely? Because that's where this is heading. You already cut me out, Ethan, I said. I'm just making sure you can't take what's left. He hung up without another word. The next 2 weeks were quiet on the surface, but the silence was the kind that builds pressure. Laura's social media went dark except for one carefully staged photo of Caleb in a nursery corner. I didn't recognize probably their new house. No mention of me. Sophie kept me updated. 2 of his smaller investors are pulling out. He's scrambling to replace them. 3 days before the escrow deadline, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a glossy magazine with Ethan on the cover, holding Caleb. The headline read, From Nothing to Everything. The Ethan Crane story. I flipped through until I found the feature. It was worse than I expected. Paragraph after paragraph painted him as a self-made man who'd overcome a controlling upbringing to build his empire. My name was their first name only, but the description was unmistakable. A mother whose fear of the world kept her son from opportunity. There was no mention of double shifts, no mention of saving for his college, no mention of the Atlas. I called Sophie. Have you seen this? Yes, she said. It's making the rounds in the business press. He's positioning himself as the face of resilience. Your money is just part of the story he's selling. That night, I took the atlas from the drawer and set it on the kitchen table. I opened to the first page, where a childish scrawl marked our first dream destination. The page opposite was one of the ones he'd torn out for his office. I sat there for a long time, tracing the empty seam with my finger. On the morning the escrow window closed, Sophie and I returned to the bank. The manager handed me a release form. Everything checks out, he said. Funds will be disbursed by the end of the day. I signed without comment. As we stepped out into the cold, Sophie said, So that's it? No, I said. That's just the part he knows about. Because what Ethan didn't know was that the 30-day delay had given me time to meet with someone else, Daniel Reed, his old college friend. We'd spoken twice. The second time in person, at a quiet cafe on the other side of town. Daniel wasn't eager to get involved, but he had information. He's working on a book, Daniel told me. Memoir style. But a lot of it's not accurate. You're in it. Not in a good way. What kind of not accurate? I asked. He's leaning hard on the idea that you held him back, that every success came in spite of you. There's a whole chapter about some fight you had over a map. Says you used it to track him, control where he went. I didn't tell Daniel about the atlas in my kitchen drawer. I just asked, do you have proof? I've seen the manuscript. I can get you an early copy, but it'll cost me. Then, decide if it's worth the cost, I said. By the time the transfer went through, Daniel had emailed me a PDF. I read it in one sitting. The lies were skillfully enough truth woven in to make them believable to someone who didn't know better. The atlas was there, twisted into a symbol of suffocation instead of love. My name wasn't on the cover, but anyone reading would know. Didn't call Ethan, not yet. Let him think the money meant he'd won. Let him move forward, unaware that I now had his words, his signatures, his contradictions all lined up and waiting. When Sophie dropped me off that afternoon, she asked, "What's your next step?" I locked eyes with her. "He thinks this is about money. It's not, it's about truth. And I'm not going to let him publish a lie." She didn't press further. Some things didn't need to be explained twice. That night, I slid the atlas back into the drawer, the key warm in my palm. I could feel the weight of the next move settling into place, not rushed, not forced, but certain. The transfer was done. The clock had started. And for the first time since the day he blocked my number, I felt the timeline was mine again. Daniel Reed called me 3 days after Sophie's last warning. I hadn't heard his name in years, but I recognized the voice instantly. Calm, deliberate, carrying the same even tone he'd had when Ethan brought him home during their college days. He didn't waste time. "We should meet," he said. "Somewhere public. I have something you should see." I agreed, though I suspected it wouldn't be a friendly reunion. We met at a quiet cafe on the corner of a narrow street downtown, the kind where people work on laptops for hours without speaking. Daniel was already there, sitting in a booth, with his back to the wall. A man who liked to see the exits. "Maribel," he said, standing briefly before motioning for me to sit. "It's been too long." His smile was polite but guarded. He had a folder on the table, thick with papers and a few glossy sheets tucked in the side. I got straight to it. "Why am I here, Daniel?" He glanced around before lowering his voice. "Because you deserve to know what Ethan is doing, and because I'm not going to be part of it." My stomach tightened, but I stayed still. "Part of what?" He opened the folder. Inside were mock-up covers, early drafts, and printouts of marketing material. The title jumped out at me first: "Breaking the Chain, One Man's Escape from a Controlling Parent." My name wasn't on the cover, but it didn't need to be. Daniel pushed a few pages toward me. "He's been working on this for over a year, memoir style. He tells it as if everything he's achieved was in spite of you, not because of you." I scanned a page, then another. Each paragraph bent the truth for the small sacrifices I'd made for him, reframed as calculated attempts to keep him dependent. My choice to work night shifts while he was in school was painted as emotional neglect. The atlas we marked together was recast as a tool I used to guilt him into following my plans. I set the papers down carefully. "And you've been helping him?" "I did some editing early on," Daniel admitted. "Thought it was just him processing things. But the more I read, the more I realized it's deliberate. He's positioning you as an antagonist in his brand's origin story, the self-made man who overcame a smothering parent. It's designed to sell." I took in the words, not allowing myself to flinch. "When is he planning to release it?" "Pre-orders open in 6 weeks, Daniel said. "He's already booked interviews. Laura's lining up social media campaigns." I leaned back. The timing wasn't lost on MIT, would coincide with his company's next product launch. Took birds with one stone, publicity for his business, and a permanent rewrite of our family's history. Daniel hesitated before adding, "There's one more thing. The book names the scholarship fund." My jaw tightened. The fund carried my name. I'd established it after retiring, to support nursing students from small towns. Ethan had offered to manage the fund's online presence, but I'd kept the finances separate. "He uses it," Daniel continued, "as an example of how you keep control claims. You set it up to push your own values on others. He implies that if he doesn't take it over, you'll waste it." The air between us felt heavier. I closed the folder and slid it back toward him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because my father died last year," Daniel said quietly. "We hadn't spoken in a decade, all because I believed someone else's version of him. I'm not going to watch that happen again if I can stop it." We sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the espresso machine filling the space. Finally, I said, "Send me copies. Everything you have. And Daniel, don't let him know you spoke to me." He nodded, slipping me a USB drive under the table. "It's all there. Drafts, emails, marketing timelines. You should also know he's scheduled a legacy photo shoot next week. It'll look like a family portrait, but the concept is him surrounded by people who shaped his journey. You're not on the list." That part didn't surprise me. I left the cafe with the drive in my coat pocket, my mind already shifting from shock to calculation. Ethan had been laying bricks for this narrative for years. I had weeks to dismantle it before it's set in concrete. At home, I plugged the drive into my computer and opened the files. It was worse than Daniel had described. He had entire chapters reframing my decisions, turning encouragement into manipulation, advice into criticism. The atlas was a recurring symbol, stripped of warmth and turned into an emblem of restraint. The marketing plan was meticulous, coordinated release dates, cross-promotion with the company's products, a series of viral-style videos. The scholarship fund was a key talking point in every interview. His angle was clear. The public loves a hero who rises above a flawed parent. And Ethan was willing to burn my name to keep their attention. I printed the relevant pages, spreading them across the dining table. Sophie's warnings echoed in my mind, but now they were joined by Daniel's confirmation. Ethan wasn't just pushing me aside, he was rewriting the truth, anchoring it in a product he could sell over and over. I called Sophie. When she picked up, I said only, "It's worse than we thought. I have proof." Her voice sharpened. "Bring it tomorrow, we'll talk options." That night, I pulled out the atlas. The faded marks, our old dreams circled in blue pen, stood in sharp contrast to the cold manipulation in Ethan's drafts. I ran my finger over the line tracing from Oregon to Man, the trip we never took. Back then, we'd promised we would, someday. Now I saw it clearly. He'd been carrying a different map in his mind all along, one where I was an obstacle to be navigated, not a companion on the journey. But he'd made a mistake. In trying to erase me, he'd left a trail, and I had 6 weeks to use it. Daniel's message came late at night, just as I was settling into bed with a cup of chamomile tea. His words were short, almost hesitant, but they struck me with the force of a blow. "You need to know what Ethan's about to release. It's about you." I didn't reply right away. My hand tightened around the mug until I feared it would. "Shaka," I called him, my voice sharper than I intended. He hesitated before speaking, his tone low, as if afraid someone might overhear. "It's a book, Maribel. He's been working on it for months. It's framed as his memoir, his rise from nothing but you. You're the obstacle in the story. The controlling mother. The one who nearly ruined him." I closed my eyes, forcing myself to listen. "It's worse than you think," he continued. "He's using details from your life, twisting them. The atlas, your nursing career, even the house. He's turning it all into proof that he overcame you. And from what I've seen, the first print run is already in production." I thanked him, though the words felt hollow. After the call, I sat in the dark, my mind racing. Sophie's earlier warnings about the money, the way Ethan had cropped me out of family photos, his exclusion of me from the naming ceremony. All of it fit into a single, ugly pattern. He wasn't just removing me from his life, he was rewriting the narrative entirely, painting me as the villain to elevate himself. The Atlas 1954, the very symbol of our shared dreams, was about to be weaponized against me in the public eye. The next morning, I went into action. I drove to the city without calling ahead. At his office building, the receptionist greeted me with a practiced smile that faltered when I gave my name. She called upstairs, then said Ethan was in meetings all day. I knew that was a lie. I told her I'd wait. An hour later, he emerged, surprised but not pleased to see me. "Mom, this isn't a good time," he said, his voice tight. "Then make it one," I replied. "I know about the book." He didn't flinch, just the faintest smirk at the corner of his mouth. "So Daniel's been talking," he said. "Figures." I asked him why he was doing this, why he felt the need to turn me into an enemy in front of the world. "It's business," he said bluntly. "People love a redemption arc, a self-made man who overcomes a suffocating parent. It sells, and it's not like you're some public figure. You'll be fine." The casual cruelty in his tone settled over me like ice. "You think I'll be fine when you erase the truth, when you turn every sacrifice I made into something shameful?" He shrugged, already checking his phone. "It's not personal, Mom. It's branding." Those words told me everything I needed to know. There would be no reasoning with him. I left without another word, my silence my only weapon in that moment. I called Sophie on the drive home. She listened without interrupting, then said, "If this is already in production, the only way to stop it is to make it financially unviable or to control the rights to the story he's trying to tell." She reminded me of the trust fund and the property. Ethan's access to those assets wasn't absolute. The final scheduled transfer of funds hadn't happened yet. "That money is his cushion," Sophie said. "Without it, he's exposed. And if the deal for the book depends on his company's image, pulling the rug out financially could force him to reconsider." Her logic was sound. I told her to prepare the paperwork. The transfer was scheduled for the end of the quarter, just weeks away. Ethan might have thought I'd sit quietly, but he had underestimated the woman who raised him. That night, I pulled the atlas from its place on my bookshelf. The pages were worn, the ink from our old notes faded but still legible. I traced the markings with my finger, remembering the little boy who used to dream with me over these maps. It was almost unbearable to imagine that in his book, this would become evidence of my control. I knew then that I couldn't just stop the money. I had to take back the atlas before he could use it. 2 days later, I went to his house. Laura answered the door, her expression polite but guarded. "Ethan's not here," she said, though I hadn't asked. I told her I'd come for the atlas, that I knew he had taken it after the christening. She tilted her head, feigning confusion. "That old thing, he's keeping it for the book photos," she said. "It's part of the narrative." Her casual use of that word made my stomach turn. I asked if I could see it. She smiled in a way that told me she enjoyed holding the power in that moment. "Sorry, Maribel, it's locked away." I left without causing a scene. There was no point in arguing with Laura. She was as invested in the brand as Ethan. Instead, I went back to Sophie and asked her to help me with a different angle. Copyright. If the atlas contained my handwriting, my original notes, could I claim intellectual property rights over it? Sophie said she'd look into it, but she warned me that legal action could take time we didn't have. That weekend, I received an invitation not from Ethan, but from the local historical society. They were hosting a small exhibition on personal artifacts that told family migration stories. The curator, an old acquaintance from the hospital, had heard me talk about the atlas years ago and wondered if I still had it. I almost laughed at the irony. But then an idea took shape. If I could publicly display the atlas before Ethan's book launch, with the real story attached to it, I could undercut his version before it ever reached the shelves. The challenge was getting it. I knew Ethan kept a study in his home, where he worked late into the night. If he wasn't expecting me, there was a chance I could get in and retrieve it. The thought of crossing that line, entering his home without permission, made me pause. But then I remembered his words. "It's not personal, it's branding." If he could strip me of my dignity in print, I could reclaim a book in ink. I waited for the right moment. One evening, I saw on Laura's social media that they were attending a gala downtown. I drove to the city, parked 2 blocks away, and walked to the house. The spare key under the garden stone was still there. He hadn't bothered to change it since before the baby was born. Inside, the house was silent. I went straight to the study. The atlas was on a shelf, inside a glass display case. For a moment, I just stood there, looking at the object that had once been our shared dream. I unlocked the case, lifted the book, and slipped it into my bag. On his desk, I saw a stack of galley proofs for the memoir. I didn't take them, but I read enough of the opening pages to know Daniel hadn't exaggerated. I locked the house again and left without looking back. By the time Ethan realized the atlas was gone, it was already in the curator's hands, accompanied by my original photographs and notes from the years we'd spent marking its pages together. The exhibition was small but well attended, and local press picked up the story. Articles described the atlas as a testament to a mother's devotion and her son's childhood dreams. Ethan's version of events hadn't even been released yet, but already, the narrative was shifting out of his control. Sophie called me a few days later to say the transfer papers were ready. I signed them, not to release the funds, but to freeze them pending review. Ethan's reaction was immediate and furious: voicemails, emails, even the letter demanding I honor our agreement. I didn't respond. The more noise he made, the more he revealed his desperation. Daniel reached out again, this time with a note of respect in his voice. "You've put him in a corner," he said. "I didn't think anyone could." I told him I wasn't done yet. The atlas was safe, the money was locked, and the truth was beginning to surface. But the final move had to be precise. Ethan had built his brand on controlling the story, and I intended to take that control away completely. Pastor Williams called on a Tuesday morning. His voice carried the same calm authority I remembered from the days when Ethan and I never missed a Sunday service. "Maribel," he said, "I've been hearing troubling things. I think we should talk." We met that afternoon in his modest office at the church, the same one where Ethan had once practiced lines for his Christmas pageant. The space hadn't changed, same oak desk, same framed photographs of congregation picnics from decades past. He listened as I laid out the situation, the blocked calls, the exclusion from family events, the atlas being taken, and now the book that painted me as an obstacle. When I finished, he steepled his hands and said, "I can't tell you how to fix your family, but I can remind you that the truth has a way of surfacing. If you have something worth protecting, don't wait for permission to defend it." His words stayed with me on the drive home. By then, the atlas was already secure in the Historical Society's care, and the trust fund remained frozen. Ethan's fury over the financial hold was growing louder. 3 voicemails in a single day. All variations of "You're destroying everything I've built." But I knew the real blow was the exhibition. Reporters had begun connecting the dots between my name, the atlas, and Ethan's carefully crafted origin story. That night, I received an unexpected email from Laura. It was brief and laced with accusation. "You've embarrassed him. This will cost us deals. I hope you're proud." There was no mention of the baby, no attempt to soften the hostility. I deleted it without replying. 2 days later, Daniel called again. "He's rewriting sections of the book," he said, "trying to adjust the story so it's less obviously about you. But the publisher's nervous. They're hearing chatter about the atlas being publicly displayed under your name." That was confirmation I needed. The leverage was working. Still, I wasn't satisfied. If Ethan succeeded in reframing the atlas as a minor detail and kept pushing the self-made narrative, the damage could linger. I needed something that would leave no room for reinterpretation, something that tied my name, my handwriting, and my intentions for Ethan directly to that book. The answer came when Sophie visited with a folder of old financial documents. Among them was the original scholarship proposal I had drafted years ago in Ethan's name, a program we'd planned to fund once his business stabilized. It bore both our signatures and included a paragraph about the atlas as a shared inspiration for a life of exploration and learning. That paragraph was my voice, indisputable and dated. If it went public, any claim that the atlas symbolized control instead of encouragement would collapse. I called Pastor Williams and asked if the church bulletin could run a short piece about the Historical Society exhibition, mentioning the atlas, and quoting from that proposal. He agreed without hesitation. "People here still remember the 2 of you poring over maps after service," he said. "It'll mean something to them." The bulletin went out on Sunday. By Monday, an online version had been picked up by a local paper. The headline was, "Simple, Mother's Atlas Inspires Generations." The article described my nursing career, the sacrifices to raise Ethan, and the shared dream embedded in those pages. Ethan's name was there, but in a context that undermined the long genius image he'd cultivated. By Wednesday, I heard from Daniel again. The publisher's considering pulling the release. They're worried about legal exposure and bad press. He hesitated before adding, "He blames me for leaking things to you." I told him I wouldn't confirm or deny anything, but I thanked him all the same. Ethan finally showed up at my house that Friday. He didn't knock, just walked in as if it were still his home. "You've made your point," he said, standing in my kitchen without sitting. "Unfreeze the funds, and I'll cut the section about you." I kept my voice steady. "It's not just about the section, it's about the truth, the atlas, the scholarship, everything we built together. You don't get to twist it into a marketing gimmick." He leaned on the counter, jaw tight. "You think you're protecting your legacy, but you're ruining mine. Then maybe your legacy needs to be ruined," I said, "if it's built on lies." For a moment, I saw something flicker in his expression, anger. Yes, but also uncertainty. Then, it was gone. He left without another word. That weekend, the Historical Society hosted a small reception for the exhibition's closing. Pastor Williams attended, as did Sophie. We stood together by the display case holding the atlas. People asked questions, pointing to the faded pen marks and my looping handwriting. I answered every one. When someone asked if Ethan would attend, I said simply, "He's busy." As the crowd thinned, Sophie leaned in. "The longer you hold your ground, the more options you'll have. If the book doesn't come out, he'll lose the advance. If it does come out in this climate, it'll be picked apart." I nodded, though my mind was already on the final step. That step came in the form of an invitation, ironically, from Ethan himself. He was hosting a charity dinner for his company, with media coverage and high-profile guests. The theme was Origins and Aspirations. It was clear he intended to salvage his image by associating himself with community goodwill. I RSVP'd yes. On the night of the event, I arrived early, wearing the same navy dress I'd worn to his college graduation. I carried nothing but a small clutch and a folded copy of the church bulletin. The room was full of photographers, and Laura worked the crowd like a practiced host. Ethan spotted me from across the room and froze for a moment before forcing a smile. When it was his turn to speak, he began the familiar story: humble beginnings, self-reliance, vision. But halfway through, I stepped toward the stage and raised the bulletin. "Ethan," I said loudly enough for the microphones to catch, "don't forget to tell them who first bought you the atlas." The room went still. Cameras turned. Ethan's smile faltered, and for a fraction of a second, he looked like the boy who once traced his finger across maps with me, dreaming of faraway places. Then the moment passed, and he stumbled through the rest of his speech. By the time dessert was served, several reporters had approached me for comment. I kept my answers factual. The year I bought the atlas, the notes we made, the scholarship proposal. I didn't need to embellish. The truth was enough. 3 days later, Daniel called with the news. The book was officially cancelled. The publisher had cited creative differences and concerns about factual integrity. Ethan's company issued a brief statement about focusing on future projects. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing joyful about dismantling your own child's ambitions, even when they were built on falsehoods. But I felt the steady satisfaction of knowing I had defended what mattered. The atlas remained in my possession, the scholarship proposal safely archived, the funds intact until I decided their fate. Ethan didn't contact me again. Laura posted pictures of their baby online, none of which included me. Life went on. The church bulletin ran another short note about the exhibition's success, and Pastor Williams left a voicemail, thanking me for reminding people that truth is worth standing for. I placed the atlas back on my shelf, not as a weapon or a shield, but as a record. Whatever came next between Ethan and me, I had drawn the line. And this time, it would hold. Ethan called me at 9 in the morning. His tone was warm, deliberate, the kind he used when speaking to investors. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot," he began. "I want to make things right between us. Can we meet? Just us?" I agreed without hesitation. It wasn't forgiveness, it was timing. We met in the private dining room of a hotel downtown. He'd chosen somewhere polished, with muted lighting and white tablecloths. It gave the illusion of civility. He spoke first, leaning forward, palms open. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt you. But I also know we both want the same thing, a future for my son, your grandson. That's why I think we should work together. We can rename the scholarship fund. Make it more about family, less about you." I didn't interrupt. I let the words settle, like dust over a sealed room. "You mean, take my name off it?" I said flatly. He winced, then masked it. "Not take it off, just reposition it. So it's not about the past, it's about the future. I can manage the fund, invest it, grow it. You'll still have credit, of course, but it'll be safe." I'd heard that word before, safe. That was what he'd promised when he mortgaged the land. That was what he told Laura's family when he pitched his startup. And it was what Sophie had warned me about when she traced the paper trail. "I'll think about it," I told him. His relief was visible. He thought he was winning. 2 hours later, I was in Pastor Williams's office. The church smelled the same as it did 40 years ago, old wood, faint candle wax. He remembered me instantly. "Maribel Crane. I heard about the baby. I haven't seen you in so long." I told him why I was there. The scholarship fund was structured under the church's community trust. Ethan didn't know that when I set it up last year, it was my way of ensuring the money stayed local, bound to specific conditions, educational use only, no commercial investments, overseen by the church board. "I need to finalize the transfer," I told Pastor Williams. He frowned. "Are you sure? Once it's done, it's permanent." "That's the point." That afternoon, I signed the documents. The fund was officially moved under the church's exclusive control. Ethan would have no legal access to it. He could give speeches, pose for photos, even claim influence, but the money would never be his to touch. 2 days later, Ethan called again. The warmth was gone. "What did you do?" "You asked me to think about it," I said. "I did, and I made my decision." His voice tightened. "You've ruined everything. That money could have paid for another launch party. Ghost-written book." "No, Ethan. It's going where it was always meant to go." He was silent long enough for me to hear his breathing. Then he hung up. The next time I saw him was at the christening. I wasn't invited. I went anyway. The church was packed, the aisles lined with white flowers. Laura looked immaculate in pale blue. Ethan stood at the front, holding the baby, speaking to the congregation about family values. He didn't see me until I walked down the side aisle and took a seat in the third pew. A murmur rippled through the room. Pastor Williams glanced at me, then continued with the service. When the moment came to present the symbolic gifts to the child, Ethan held up the atlas, 1954. This, he told the guests, was given to me by my mother when I was a boy. It represents her desire to control every step of my journey. I'm giving it to my son so he knows he can chart his own path free from that control. Gasps whispered across the pews. My hands stayed in my lap. When the ceremony ended, I waited until the crowd began to leave, then stepped forward. I took the atlas from the altar. Ethan, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the hall, you left out a detail. Every mark in this book was made by both of us. Every dream in it was yours and mine together. That's not control. That's care, and this book is not yours to twist into something else. I turned to Pastor Williams. Would you keep this for the scholarship library? He nodded and took it from me. The room was silent. Laura avoided my gaze. Ethan's jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might crack a tooth. I left without looking back. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Daniel Reed, a link. Ethan's book launch had been postponed indefinitely. The publisher had chosen to revisit the manuscript due to concerns over source integrity. I didn't need details. I knew exactly why. The atlas, the fund transfer, and the church's public records were enough to unravel the image he'd built. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea. The house was quiet, the August light steady through the blinds. I thought about the year behind me, the hospital parking lot where I first realized I'd been blocked, the photos where I'd been erased, the interviews that recast my life as something ugly. It would be easy to call it betrayal, but betrayal implies surprise. Looking back, there had been signs for years, the edits to our stories, the rebranding of our family history, the selective memory at holidays. I'd mistaken those for quirks, not warnings. What I've learned is simple, but it is not kind. In families, loyalty is often conditional. The people you pour yourself into may one day see you as an obstacle to be managed, not a person to be cherished. When that day comes, the fight isn't to win back their affection. It's to protect your dignity and your truth before they're rewritten without you. I didn't get my son back. I may never hold my grandson without someone watching, but the fund is safe. The atlas holds our real story, preserved where he can't distort it, and I am no longer waiting for permission to exist in his version of the family. To those of you listening who have been pushed to the margins of your own bloodline, stop trying to re-enter through the same door that was slammed on you. Build a new entrance. Place what matters where it cannot be stolen or altered. Let them tell their stories and keep the real one in your hands. If you're standing at that crossroad now, hear me. You are not required to play the part they've assigned you. You can take yourself out of their script entirely. It won't fix the loss, but it will stop the theft. Thank you for walking this road with me. If my story has helped you see your own more clearly, stay with me for the next one. There's more to tell, and I'd like you there when I do.